Me, Hillary speak time pushed back an hour.
Yeah, push back until 9:30 Central Time, and she'll be speaking not at the place with the glass ceiling. You know where she had the party last night and didn't show up? She's going to be speaking.
That metaphor's by the board.
Yeah, sorry. She's going to be speaking at the Grand Ballroom at the New Yorker Hotel at 9:30, and we will have it live here. Mike Scott, who's been working around the clock, we'll have it here for you.
The speech we've waited 30 years for, the go-away speech. Cannot wait for it. So also had state elections yesterday. Donald Trump, Mark Kirk lose the state by 14 points, and that had a bigger down-ballot impact than some, including myself, had hoped. So, for example, Leslie Munger, who only lost by 5 percentage points, but came out of Cook County 500,000 votes down, falls short in the comptroller's race. I hope she comes back and runs again in 2 years based on the job she did, the goodwill she did, built, the campaign she ran. I think she's still formidable. This was turns out to be difficult. I still think when you do the postmortem and you look at the impact in terms of total ballots cast, that same-day voter registration at polling places in just the 20 most populous counties, you're going to see that having a big impact. In addition to perhaps the $10 million ad blitz at the end through a super PAC that State Senator Dan Biss, this dink from the North Shore, was running, that focused on connecting Rauner and quote-unquote Illinois Republicans, Rauner Republicans, to Donald Trump. Certainly Donald Trump lost the state by 14. He lost the collar counties by more. Places like DuPage that are erstwhile bastions of republicanism that just aren't anymore, and real disappointment in Eastern DuPage with the opportunity to pick up a couple of seats that did not materialize. The net, 5 challengers, Republican challengers won in the House, but we lost one incumbent in Southern Illinois, so it's a net +4 in the House that gets Republicans out of the superminority. In the Senate, +2 pickup only. I was thinking more it would be like +8 and +5. Instead, it's +4 and +2. Progress, but the balance of power in Springfield remains House Speaker Mike Madigan, Senate President John Cullerton, 2 Chicago Democrats, Governor Bruce Rauner. How does the next 2 years play out now that the dynamic has changed a little bit, but not necessarily a lot? We put that question to our friend, Kristen McQueary, member of the Chicago Tribune editorial board, who joins us now. Kristen, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So what about that? How does the legislative races and the balance of power as it will stand after January, how does it change what is going to happen policy-wise in Illinois with getting things like, a constitutionally balanced budget and other structural reforms that Governor Rauner has proposed?
Well, I don't know that it's going to move the policy discussion forward. The 6-month budget that they passed is going to run out of money, basically, at the end of December. They're going down for 2 weeks of veto session. They'll have to address that. But Republicans did respectably. They needed to do that. They picked up 5 seats, but like you said, Republicans lost 1. That's significant. I mean, that sends a message. And one of the seats they lost was John Bradley, who is basically Mike Madigan's assistant majority leader representing all of downstate. So that was a big message sent. That was important. They were able to hang on to the only Republican seat on the Northwest side that is represented by a Republican, Mike McAuliffe. A lot of Democratic money spent on that race, and they hung on to it. But the problem is, just from my viewpoint, Rauner and the Republicans are trying to move forward on policy issues, and the Democrats aren't. They've had no interest in talking about making Illinois more business-friendly or passing a balanced budget. So I think this, is setting the Democrats back on their heels a bit. But in terms of advancing policy, I don't know that that's going to happen.
What do you think Mike Madigan's reaction would be to the 4 seats that you picked up in the House?
He still has
him a little bit?
16 seat lead over Republicans. He's still the speaker. I don't know that it will really make that much of a difference day to day in how he runs the House. We'll have to see.
Yeah, now the other interesting wrinkle with Trump's victory is it possible Madigan and Cullerton and the Chicago Democrat power structure look at 2018 and say, well, look, with Trump and Republicans in control of everything, the midterms should be good for us. So that gives us even less incentive to do anything that is constructive with respect to Bruce Rauner and any type of policy agenda, we can just wait out the next 2 years, and we should have a pretty good environment to go after the governor as well as legislative races.
Right. I mean, I think we have seen that their agenda is gridlock. And I've just never seen them motivated by advancing policy issues. So I think now sights are going to be set on 2018. I would keep your eye on that comptroller's race. I was disappointed to see that Leslie Munger was not able to get a full term. I mean, Susana Mendoza has a very close relationship with the speaker. There are some concerning issues that could arise there with how she could use the office to, advance his policies or make it more of a political office than it's been. And that's disconcerting. There were some other, disappointments. The suburbs, basically, they're sticking with their Democratic lawmakers.
Yeah.
All 5 of those seats that Republicans picked up were downstate and outside of the Collar County areas. So
with the exception of Reich and McHenry. Correct.
That's true. Jack Frank's leaving that seat. The Republican Stephen Reich was able to pick that up. But outside of that, you did learn, don't play video games on the House floor, because the 2 Democratic lawmakers who got caught doing that were both ousted.
That's great.
Yeah.
Were they playing Candy Crush? Or
Candy Crush, that's right. Yeah.
Don't be goofing off. Yeah.
Right. No, you can goof off, just don't get caught, I guess, is the real lesson to be learned from that, because there's a lot of goof offs that still won, to your point. And I suppose that's the real frustration. I mean, if you're affiliated with the Republican Party, which I am, that, look, it's never going to be a majority party, as I want to say, if it's not a party of the suburbs. And when you see what happened in Eastern DuPage, when you see what happened in Northwest Suburban Cook, even though they're competitive races, when you see what happened with the Michelle Smith Senate race in Will County, again, a competitive race. But at the end of the day, being competitive isn't enough. You got to win, and they're not winning races. And I wonder if that is a function of just a psychographic shift in the suburbs, a wrong issue menu being presented, because I thought we had some pretty good candidates who ran pretty good races this time.
Absolutely. I mean, some of them were rematches, and they are very strong candidates, and they make an excellent case that the state is moving in the wrong direction. So I think a lot of that, I think you and I have argued about this, but I think a lot of that has to do with the map. It is just very hard to overcome, because you have such loyal Democratic voters drawn into these districts that they are just not going to entertain anybody with an R next to their name. And my other piece of sort of bad news is that, as you know, Jan Schakowsky was reelected by a pretty much wider margin than the past 2 years. So Mr. and Mrs. Creamy are going to be around
Bob
for a while longer.
Creamy Bob. Creamy Bob, and who is the
Kristen, we can't use
convicted felon husband of Calamity Jan Schakowsky. I had to get that in one more
Amy.
time.
I know.
Creamy Bob.
Okay, it was
and Jan.
gross.
So here, one other thing I noticed too, as we're watching the returns on some of these legislative races, and this may go to infrastructure, right, electoral strength from a political perspective. It seems like in the suburbs, Democrats really outpaced Republicans with early voting. And it seemed to me that had to be a concerted effort. That was a program that they ran that Republicans didn't, or they ran in a much superior fashion to the programs Republicans were running.
They did, and they targeted their loyal voters. I mean, the early voters that I've seen out of DuPage even were Hispanic communities. Large numbers of Hispanics voted early. And so, it's another example of where the Democrats just always seem to be one step ahead. And they have this formula that works, where they kind of ignore the media. They buy 3 or 4 pairs of tennis shoes, and they just send these candidates out over and over and over to knock on doors. And that's what works for them.
And we've got Bob Dole doing the typical Brad Schneider gets a term, then Bob Dole gets a term, then Brad Schneider gets a term, then Bob Dole gets a term. Now Brad Schneider has another term. So Bob Dole will be reelected in 2018 and then Schneider in 2020. And this will go on for the next century.
I'm tired of that ping pong match. I don't know about you, but again, Brad Schneider obviously helped by Democratic turnout in a presidential election, because that district tends to prefer more moderate representation, which is exactly what Bob Dole brought them. Brad Schneider is much more to the left of his party than Bob Dole is to the right of his, and voters picked Brad Schneider. So the ping pong match continues.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't want to do it anymore. Maybe he's had enough.
Well, I mean,
but Bob Dole couldn't be more moderate if he tried.
Well, I mean, look, the thing is, you look around and what happened in Indiana, and how about Wisconsin, which hadn't gone for a Republican since 1984 at the presidential level. So, boy, you have a governor, and you have a Priebus, and you have a Ryan, and you build infrastructure, and you have a good senator in Ron Johnson, and it's interesting what can happen in a presidential cycle. And Iowa, Missouri, Missouri by 20 points almost. Trump won Missouri in addition to holding the Senate seat. Do you have kind of a Great Lakes perspective, Kristen, on what the hell is wrong with this state as compared to our Midwestern neighbors?
I would need a couch and a very stiff glass of scotch to probably analyze that. I just really think, as much as we try to argue that we are getting more purple and we elected Governor Bruce Rauner, I just think we are a Democratic state. We have a huge urban center that a lot of these other places don't have that is so loyal to the Democratic Party, being Chicago's suburban cook. And as you said, even Republican strongholds are losing a lot of that. So the numbers just aren't there. And I'll say it again, I've said it a million times, the Republican Party does not do a good job of building bridges with those communities in this state. You have, the House lost its only black Republican who took a job with the administration, but you never even saw the party sort of capitalize on the fact that they had elected the first black Republican to the House. So I think it's a mixture of all of that. And certainly the gridlock in Springfield is getting blamed on Bruce Rauner more so than Speaker and the Senate President, and that doesn't help either.
All right. She is Kristen McQueary, Chicago Tribune editorial board member. Kristen, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.